Welcome to the Running for Real podcast, where each week we bring you a conversation designed to help you create positive change in your life, community, and planet. It's a collective of conversations about running, the climate emergency, and social justice. Running for Real is for the brave, for those with courage and vulnerability. United by our love of running, we're driving momentum towards some of the really tough challenges we're facing as humanity. So come join me, Tina Muir, and let's get started. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 247 of the Running for Real podcast. I am excited you are here. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you think of this episode. It's going to be a little bit different. It does still feature a runner, and we go off in a slightly different tangent to what I expected, but I think you are going to find it really enjoyable, as it's something that I think is on a lot of our hearts right now. I'm excited to introduce that we are going to have a best-selling author, Julia Terschen, on the show today. Her cookbook was voted Amazon's best cookbook of 2018. She also had a book that was voted the best cookbook of 2016 by the New York Times and NPR. She's a podcast host. She's a writer for the New York Times, Washington Post, Vogue, and more. And she is a runner. She is taking some time off because of her running, but we actually talk a little bit about being able to step away from something when you feel like you're not in love with it anymore. We also talk about the fact that trying to decide what you're going to have for dinner that evening can be really stressful. And even as a home cook, even as someone who does this for her job, she gets fed up too. So there's going to be a lot of things that resonate in this episode with, I think, more of us in more ways than we may realize. I'm really excited to introduce Julia to you. And I think we'll just hear from one of our sponsors and we'll get right to the episode with Julia Terschen. Thank you to Momentous for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. I am excited to tell you about something different today. I have given you little snippets about this in the past, but now I can say I have used it within my race, seen the benefits of it, not just within my working life, but also within my running life. And I'm excited to tell you more. So Momentous has a product called Brain Drive. You've heard me talking about their collagen peptides, you've heard me talking about the performance creatine, and you've heard me talking about Elite Sleep. Brain Drive is for focus, motivation, and memory. It is a supplement designed to optimize brain function and support long-term brain health. It's going to promote focus, motivation, positivity, and learning they're combining these doses of these research-backed ingredients that support the production of dopamine and acetylcholine, which are those neurotransmitters that's responsible for how the cells in your brain communicate. I have really been enjoying this, as I mentioned, as a caffeine-free alternative when I have chunks of time to do work. And I have found that it has really helped me to stay on task, as in not be task switching all the time, be working on some writing and then suddenly check my emails and then pop over to an article that I found on Twitter. I really have found that I've been able to just stick with things a little bit more. It almost feels like you've got some kind of little cheat going on. It doesn't feel like you should be able to focus as well as you do. I also used it in my race. I took 2 Brain Drive tablets at the halfway point of the race. They went down well, and I focused for 4.5 hours scanning the ground in my trail race. And as I won it outright, the first man being 34 minutes behind me, I feel like I can say it worked decently well and I didn't fall once. So it's that niacin, which is essential for nervous system development, function and maintenance, and also the vitamin B6. There's a lot of that in there, B9, B12, and some other ingredients that I don't want to even try and pronounce, but they are definitely things I have heard of before, so don't worry about that. You can get 20% off your order at livemomentous.com by using code TINA to get 20% off your order. That's livemomentous.com to get 20% off your order. Julia, thank you so much for joining me today on the Running for Real podcast. I'm excited you are here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun and just a bit of a different approach. I was trying to think this through and I'm not sure I've ever had. Okay, well, here's my problem. What term do you tend to go by? Is it cook? Is it chef? Is it recipe developer? Like, what is the term? I don't even know.
Like, what do I fill out on my tax form?
Yeah.
I definitely, if someone asks me what I do, I just say I write cookbooks.
Okay.
I'm a cookbook author, but I definitely, identify as a home cook. I don't identify as a chef. To me, that's like someone who works in a restaurant or who runs a restaurant kitchen. I mean, it can mean other things, but that's what I think of. So okay. I just feel like I'm a very proud home cook who writes for other home cooks.
So home cook means literally what it sounds like. You create your recipes, whatever social media you do is in your own home, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Well, welcome home cook Julia Terschen to the Running for Real podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
So I'm excited to dig in here. We are going to talk about running. You are a runner yourself. And just for the listeners, a bit of background, Julia is a best-selling author. Her book, Now and Again, was Amazon's best cookbook of 2018. Her book, Small Victories, was voted the best cookbook of 2016 by the New York Times and NPR. You're a podcast host. You're a writer for the New York Times, Washington Post, Vogue, and many more. I mean, that's quite a lot of things to someone's name. So I'm just going to let people soak that in for a minute here. But for the first part of the interview, I wanted to take some time. I always really enjoy with cookbooks the little section at the beginning where you get to know the author, the kind of story or whatever. But I sometimes find those really unrelatable or they just, to me, kind of I sometimes try to end up feeling less positive about the person than I did going in, almost like it's a bit too showy. But I really enjoyed the fact that for you went to some different areas. And maybe that's because you've released previous cookbooks. But I just wanted to go deeper into some of the concepts and things that you talked about in the book, because I just found them really interesting. And I think listeners will find them interesting too. So firstly, you said that sometimes people can believe in home cooking, yet at the same time feel tired of it. Now, coming out of this 2020, 2021, people have been doing a lot of home cooking, either out of necessity, really. I think I would imagine most people are pretty burned out on home cooking, but still, yes, see the importance of it. And I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that I often feel like trying to decide what to make for dinner is one of the most, like, the biggest hassles of my day, because it's just, I know that's a time to be with my family and nourish myself, but it still is a thing that every day I'm like, what to do today? So tell us your thoughts on that. What did you mean by that?
Totally. Well, what I wrote in the book, which I think is just something I'm so happy to share on this podcast more than any other, is that I very much believe in the marathon and not the sprint of home cooking. And for me, that means I'm a daily home cook. Just like you said, so many people have been, whether they were before or not. And that moment that you described, that moment in your daily life of trying to figure out what to make for dinner, and that causes any, stress or anxiety or just confusion or just feeling over it, whatever that might be. I really understand that moment. I feel it often. And I also feel the opposite often. I feel that cooking at home is the one thing that feels really sure in my life. It's the thing that makes me feel so grounded. It makes me feel so connected. It makes me feel the opposite of stressed out. It makes me feel very, very relaxed. I'm also just going to acknowledge you might hear my dog barking in the back. Okay. I think that she sees a squirrel. She's a sprinter. She is not a marathoner. So this book, my new book, Simply Julia, it really holds both of these things at the same time. It holds, on the one hand, that cooking can be so joyful, so relaxing, so engaging. And on the other hand, it also fully acknowledges, like, it can be relentless and it can be frustrating and it can feel like, oh my gosh, do I have to do this again? Like, I just made dinner last night, And I think within the recipes, I think I offer some ideas and maybe some answers to that question. But mostly what I really tried to offer in this book is just a lot of honesty.
Yeah.
And, and the sort of feeling of like, if you don't feel like cooking every day, like, that's okay. Like, that makes sense. And that makes sense to me. And I'm someone who loves it, right? I've made my whole life about it. I've cooked since I was a little kid. I write cookbooks for a living. I have, a really comfortable kitchen. I have a dishwasher. I have a station wagon I can put groceries in. I'm just cooking for me and my wife. We don't have, young children or other people living in our home. Like, I have a lot of things going for me when it comes to cooking at home. And I also sometimes get tired of it. And I just think there's room for all of that.
I would love to dive into that in a different avenue in just a second, because I think there's definitely like a thread we can pull on there. But I agree in almost everything you've said there. And especially, I have noticed that the grounding you mentioned and the importance of it, I do look forward to the time I am cooking, and I do enjoy that. Part of me, I think maybe that is because I have a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old, and that time is time I can listen to a podcast or like just be doing one thing.
Totally.
Although actually, I'd say maybe 4 out of 7 days a week, I'm trying to do both, watch the children and do that. So maybe not those days, but I still do enjoy that part of it. And so I think you are right that both of those things can exist at the same time. And I'd love for you to, I know this isn't going to be your expertise as such to answer this question, but what has this past year taught you about being okay with both things? I mean, there's been a lot of guilt over the last year of I'm like, this really sucks. Like, this is just really hard, but I feel guilty for feeling hard. Because why should it feel hard? I'm healthy. I have everything I need. Like, there's no reason for me to be feeling this way when other people are really struggling. Tell me your thoughts on that as a general concept in our life.
I mean, this is something I think about a lot, and I basically start every therapy session with my therapist, like talking about whatever world event just happened that is, that's made the news, that is horrific. And unfortunately, there's so many to choose from, right? And I arrived to my therapy session to really tend to my, mental health and to, have this place where I can be honest and vulnerable and all these things and work through things and process things. And I find it difficult every time. And I've been in and out of therapy for like my entire adult life. And every session, I find it really hard to start talking about like the things that I'm having trouble with just personally. And that's what I'm there for. That's what I'm paying for, and so just to say, I don't know, I really understand what you're saying, and it's hard, but I think we have to remember that when we, don't try to diminish or belittle the things that we're feeling on an individual level, if we can tend to those things and if we can acknowledge them, I think then we can respond to the bigger things, in a much more, I think, productive way, in a much more helpful way, in a much more empathetic way. I think if we keep pushing aside our own stuff because it's not as bad, quote unquote, or not as big or any of those things, then, we're rendered pretty useless. Like, I can't be a part of, I don't know, doing more for my community if I'm not taking care of myself. So, I think that whole thing of putting on your air mask before you help someone with theirs, like, I think about that a lot. But I don't know, this is just definitely something I struggle with. I'm not like an expert on this, but I really understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's obviously the area for psychologists, psychiatrists to be able to speak to. But yeah, I've just noticed a lot of that in the past year and I've done it too. And even talking earlier about, we were saying about the, what do I cook today? I mean, that is a very, very minor problem for.
Yeah. Wonderful problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's okay to say like, yeah, sometimes you can feel, especially for someone who maybe has, I don't know, has a celiac in their family, a vegan in their family, a picky child, like, that is quite a lot of stress, whatever way you look at that.
Totally. And I think that I'll rephrase that. I think part of what draws me to cooking so much and what draws me to writing cookbooks, it feels like this daily opportunity to alleviate something. And, I don't think helping people figure out what to make for dinner is going to bring about world peace necessarily or anything like that. But I do think if I can help one person, if I can help you, one night this week, just have that moment in your day-to-day life that just often feels stressful. If that feels just absent of stress, like that feels worthy to me and valuable. And I feel like for me, I find that kind of opportunity in things like writing cookbooks and talking about food in a way that's just very honest and hopefully like easygoing. But I think we can all find these ways in different things we do and, whatever it is we care about. So for me, it's food because this is what I love, but, it could be anything.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's very true. And I'm glad you mentioned that for listeners who are thinking, well, I'm not great at designing recipes, but yeah, you're right. Everyone has something. Okay. So diving on into it a little bit deeper, Simply Julia is full of these meals that you say don't try to wow you, but hug you, which perfectly timed there with, not that you intended that, with the year that we've had. We need those hugs in any way we can get them. But tell us about your opinion of the power of food in this way, because it seems very much like we've shifted. I mean, hopefully coming out, but in many ways, our society has shifted the dynamic to make food almost the enemy. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, this is like such a huge topic, but I think my immediate thoughts are that I feel like food, like so many other things, running, so many other things, because we live in such a, I don't know, hyper capitalist, hyper productive, hyper like celebrity culture world, all of these things, especially in the age of social media, I feel like there's just this huge amount of pressure on all these things. And I think that often people look at things like social media or cookbooks for that matter and see these beautiful photographs and, these words indicating certain ingredients that sound really fancy or something. And I think there is this feeling of just pressure that everything has to look this good. And when we cook, it's this chance to impress other people and to show off. And I find that it makes me just want to go under my covers and go to sleep. And I feel so stressed out by that. And I'm someone who makes images like this, right? Like I make contemporary cookbooks. And for me, at the end of the day, I don't want anyone to feel like impressed when I cook for them. I want them to feel taken care of. And I really don't want anyone to try and impress me or wow me in some way with their cooking. Like, I just am so grateful that someone is taking the time to make me a meal. And I feel like if we approach it from this place that just feels like a little more on the ground to me rather than high up kind of in the air and, buzzing around trying to one up each other, it just feels like a lot kinder to me. And it just takes the pressure away. It takes the stress away. All these things we've been, talking about the whole time. And for me, a lot of this comes down to the cooking that my wife, Grace, and I have done for years now at a place where we volunteer in our community. It's a place called Angel Food East. It's basically like our local Meals on Wheels program. And there's places like this across the country, across the world, that provide homemade meals for people who are homebound for a variety of reasons. And everything we're talking about right now, I'm reminded of so much when we do that cooking. And it's very much the spirit I wanted to bring to this book, which is we are cooking for clients who, for whatever reason, whether they're too sick or whatever the reason might be, they cannot cook for themselves. So we are making a meal for someone who can't make it for themselves. And within that meal, we're often cooking for people who live with chronic illness. So people who might not have an appetite, but who are on like really strong medication, like who need the nourishment, like who need to eat. So I'm not trying to make anything fancy. I'm trying to make something that is so appealing and so comforting and makes people feel very taken care of and makes them hopefully feel like the person on the other end of it, the person making the meal, took some care and consideration for their needs. I'm trying to pack those meals with, as many fresh vegetables and nutrients and all these things on a pretty tight budget, on a pretty tight timeline. And to me, the food we cook there, and many of these recipes are in the book. This to me is exactly what the book is. It's healthy comfort food. And it is this food that tries to hug you and not wow you. I don't care about any of that. Like, I just care about the care, right?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And you did talk about that a lot. So maybe we can go into that. And then I do want to just go back to healthy for a little bit. But
sure,
you did say about you've been thinking a lot about honoring where food comes from, about thinking about those who take care of people and how those who do take care of people are essential. Tell me, why did you include that part about why did you feel that part was important?
Sure. I turned in the very first draft of this book in February 2020. So right before the pandemic. Well, it was already in the world, but before here in the United States, it really, quite literally hit home. And I then photographed it in the spring of 2020, and I basically got to edit the book over the course of, the beginning of the pandemic. So I got to reflect more than ever on the role of home cooks, in our culture, in our society, the, unpaid, often undervalued labor that home cooks, do for their families, their communities, their households. And I also got to reflect on everything that makes it possible for us to cook at home. The people who grow our food, the people who stock grocery shelves, the people who mop the floors at grocery stores and, work at the cash registers, and people who deliver things on trucks so they can, be available in our kitchens, and all these things that have to happen just for us to cook at home. And yeah, I guess I just wanted to take the opportunity to just sort of name that. And I think it's a moment to remember that, even if we're standing alone in our kitchen, making a meal just for ourselves, like we're not cooking for anyone, we're just cooking for ourselves. Like maybe I'm making myself a sandwich for lunch. Nobody else is around. It feels like the solitary thing. But it's not. There are so many people involved, like the person who baked the bread that I'm using, the person who, whatever, grew the tomato that I'm slicing. All of these things happened so that I could have my sandwich, right? Like something so simple, so mundane. And when I reflect on these things, when I write about them, it feels to me this moment to just see, that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves. And that can feel overwhelming at times. And I think we can also see so many problems and issues within the food system that need to be addressed. But I also think we often can find a lot of solutions and a lot of inspiration within that. If we're looking around in our area, who's baking what, who's growing what, like how can we support them? Every time we spend money on food, whether it's ingredients or takeout or, a restaurant, whatever it is, it really is like a very political decision. Like we're deciding who to invest in.
Thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. I have been raving about Tracksmith for years. I love their clothes. Now we are in the summer months. I'm excited that I can have my session shorts back on. I love, love, love wearing them throughout the summer. And there are all kinds of really cool tanks that you can go try on for your runs, for your date. I wear them in my day-to-day life. I wear them for when I'm running. I pretty much wear them all the time. I also wear them to sleep in sometimes. You would be hard-pressed to find a day where I'm not wearing a Tracksmith tank. They are wonderful. And I'm excited to tell you that Tracksmith now has a Bill Rogers collection. So Bill Rogers, you have heard him on the podcast a few months ago, and now they have released this collection in his style. There's a Boston Billy jacket, there's a 79 singlet and some shorts. There's also some accessories. And men, you have a few more options there as well. It's just really cool to look at these items that celebrate the spirit of his heyday, in which that was an era that it was about just having fun as well as being fast. So you can go to tracksmith.com and use code TINA15 for $15 off your order of $75 or more. You can go check out those session shorts I mentioned. You can go check out their tanks. You could just get lost forever in their clothes. I love it. They're also doing some wonderful things for our community. So while you're there, be sure to go stop by and check out their journal. They have logbooks in there. They have little films. They have stories. There's all kinds of really cool stuff. You could easily spend hours on the Tracksmith website. Go to tracksmith.com and use code TINA15 for $15 off your order of $75 or more.
When I reflect on these things, when I write about them, it feels to me this moment to just see, that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves. And that can feel overwhelming at times. And I think we can also see so many problems and issues within the food system that need to be addressed. But I also think we often can find a lot of solutions and a lot of inspiration within that. If we're looking around in our area, who's baking what, who's growing what, like how can we support them? Every time we spend money on food, whether it's ingredients or takeout or, a restaurant, whatever it is, it really is like a very political decision. Like we're deciding who to invest in, So yeah, those are a lot of thoughts.
No. I know. I think all of those are important to mention. And I'm glad that you did. Do you have any thoughts on, and speaking from experience here, because I know, and especially I have some family members who are really into like slow eating, enjoying every bite, putting their fork down between. And even though I know how good that is, how important it is to appreciate and to do what you were just talking about there, to think about where your food has come from. And I mean, especially like we have a CSA, so we get things from, so I know that someone close to me has created this food. Yeah, I still find myself on my computer or doing something and just shoveling it in without even thinking, like, any thoughts for people like me, but I'm sure other people, to how to like snap yourself out of that, just like, let me get it down as quick as I can.
Sure. I mean, I will say that as much as I'm talking about this, and it might even sound like I'm romanticizing some of this, like I often think of myself when I'm eating a meal, my wife eats very slowly. And I'm always referring to myself as like the vacuum. Like I eat so fast. And, that sandwich I just described, like I'm probably eating it standing up in my kitchen, like on a paper towel. Like, but I will at times take the time, and I often do this, to make a meal and we sit down and we eat it. When it comes to feeding myself, I tend to be a little bit more, I don't know. I don't think I value feeding myself the way I value feeding other people. And I tend to do it in a much more rushed way. I can only imagine for you with 2 little kids. I mean, and you're busy. Like, I'm sure the time to sit down and be mindful about your meal and stuff, that probably is a very rare opportunity. So in terms of snapping out of that, I think one, just not feeling the pressure or that it's wrong to eat something on the go. Like if that's allowing you to do these other things in your life, like, okay, whatever. Like I push against the idea of like perfection in any form. But in terms of just having a moment to just appreciate like the baker, the farmer, whatever it might be, I think it can be as easy as just having like a little pause. I mean, the way, I'm not religious, but the way a lot of people will say grace before a meal, and sometimes that's really short, it could be a few seconds, but just having that slight pause, that acknowledgement. And I don't know, I find that it's much easier for me to think about all these other people involved, and that puts me immediately into a place of gratitude. Yeah. And that is a place where I feel, I don't know, it makes me feel really good. Yeah, and it makes me feel like separate from all of this sort of competitive kind of stuff and the, desire to impress and everything like that. I think another thing that I've found really helpful is remembering that when we see a photograph of something beautiful, whether it's food or something else, but I'll talk just about food. Like if we see it on Instagram or we see it in a cookbook and it looks like it was so effortlessly beautiful,
Mhm.
I just feel like I can say this firsthand because I've been in the room where many photographs of food have been taken. Like so many people were involved to make that photograph. It didn't just happen like that. Like there are prop stylists, like that's a profession. People who just pick the objects that go into these photographs. And anytime, if it's a really simple thing, maybe like a bowl of soup with like a napkin and a spoon next to it, like people probably went through 10 different napkins. They probably put it in 10 different places. Like all of these things that appear so easy and effortless and just organically beautiful. Like they were so produced, even the simplest ones. And I feel like maybe that's a little different from what we're talking about, but in terms of having that moment of just like pause and gratitude and appreciation, I think just remembering that, like if we're in a place where we're feeling that sort of pressure to remember, like, what are we actually looking at?
Yeah.
And just kind of take it apart that way. I find that helpful. It immediately, like, it usually just makes me laugh to think about. And that's,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, laughing is good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, I had a blog in 2012-ish, and it's morphed into what is my website today over the years. But oh my God, I can't even tell you how many tears I cried trying to, because it was food initially. It was like dessert, like, baked goods. The amount of tears I cried trying to set up things and it just feeling like a total failure every single time.
Yeah.
And like seeing other pictures and being like, why does mine look nothing like that? It's just so, yes, I can laugh at it now. But at the time, it was the most stressful part of any meal. So I definitely appreciate hearing that. And I think that is good. Even when you look at a cookbook and you see that's what they've shown you that it looks like. And then you're looking at yours and you're like, mine doesn't look like that. So, I followed the instructions. So yeah, I think that is really important that you mention that. So thanks for bringing that up. And going back to the healthy concept of things, you spent a good paragraph talking about what you define as healthy, and a description of healthy, which you talked about food being freedom, about healthy being freedom. How would you say that's different to how other people or how our society may define the word healthy?
Sure. I feel incredibly proud to have written a cookbook of healthy recipes that has nothing to do with weight loss and that doesn't promote losing weight or dieting in any form. This book is not about restriction or deprivation of any kind. There's no plan. There's nothing to follow. It's just a collection of really, fun recipes that are really easy to make. Because I think easy is a big part of healthy. I think that the word healthy has been used and overused and misused so much that I don't even really know what it means. And I think it's most often been used as a word in place of the word skinny. And I find that incredibly dangerous because our weight doesn't determine our health and skinny does not equal healthy. And I think that's just a fact. And I think it really puts us immediately into the place that I feel like we've been talking about this whole time, this place of feeling like, well, if my food, on my blog or whatever, doesn't look like this, like you use the word failure, like you said, you felt like you were failing. And I feel like, I grew up fully in diet culture. I grew up with parents who were always dieting. I grew up in a world where it was just assumed that the best thing you could be was thin. And so I was constantly trying to make my body smaller. I was constantly trying to take up less space because I thought I would therefore be more valuable, which means I was constantly feeling like I was failing because my body takes up the space it takes up. My frame is what it is. And I, for so long, confused healthy with skinny. So I thought I wasn't healthy because I wasn't skinny. And I am so privileged and so grateful to live in a very healthy body. And it isn't the thinnest body. It's not the fattest body. It's just the body I live in.
Mm-hmm.
So coming to understand this has been just really hard for me, to be honest. I've had to unlearn, I think, more than I've had to learn. And I think I was able to bring this all to this cookbook, which is, on the surface, like a cookbook of just easy recipes for healthy comfort food. That's the subtitle. And it's exactly that. But I think under the surface, it is very much pushing against diet culture. And it's very much pushing for us all to define whatever healthy means for each of us, because I really believe it's something we have to define personally, because it means something different for all of us, like depending on what our needs are, what's available to us, what our abilities are or our disabilities are. The definition changes based on all these variables. Like if one size fit all, I mean, there would just be a lot less to talk about. There would be less cookbooks, less podcasts. And so for me, the way I define it is exactly what you said. It's about freedom. It's about feeling free from these pressures, from this misinformation, from guilt. For me, so long consuming food came with, guilt always. And it's free from restriction. And it makes me feel, when I feel my healthiest, I feel free just in my body. Mm-hmm. And it also has a lot to do with connection. All the things we were talking about, feeling connected to whoever, grew or made the food I'm eating, feeling connected to the people I'm eating with, feeling connected to my wife, and most of all, feeling connected to myself, being aware of when am I hungry and when have I had enough, and when do I feel like moving and when do I feel like resting, and all of these things, just getting in touch with those things, which I feel like sound and seem really simple, but for me have not been simple because I've been so out of touch with my body for so long that getting in touch with it is, it's a practice I've continued to work on every day. So
yes, yeah. I would like to go more into that with you in a minute. Before we do though, you said there about, or we've been talking about, redefining your version of the word healthy, finding what matters to each and every individual. But I'm curious, why define that word? Why bring that word in? Like for me, and you don't know a lot about my history, but I was a professional runner, had an eating disorder, quit the sport because I hadn't had my period in 9 years because of undereating. And for me, I really I almost cringe when anyone says the word healthy to my daughter. I'm like, don't use that word.
Yeah.
Because I hate that word. Not the definition that you use, but just what it brings to me.
No,
that
I understand.
Some foods are healthy. That therefore means some foods are not healthy. And so I've tried to really separate myself from that. And I'm not saying I love what you wrote there. And I believe in the whole thing. I could have written it myself, but curious why you decided to redefine it rather than just omit
not
it.
Use it. Yeah, that's a great question. And I appreciate you asking that. And I appreciate everything you shared. And I don't know, I've found the word to also be triggering and to bring up things that don't make me feel great. I think there's a lot of words that feel that way to me in this department. Words like, in addition to healthy, words like skinny or, I really hate the term clean eating. I feel like, oh, so everything else is dirty? What does that mean? So I really get it. And I appreciate you asking. And I don't think when, we came up with the subtitle for the book, which I wrote, my editor and publisher approved, I totally take ownership over that. I don't think it occurred to me to not use it. And I don't know, you're giving me some pause and I appreciate it. Can't go backwards, but I think there's also some power in reclaiming certain words. I'm a very proud out gay woman, and it's taken me a long time to use the word queer. And I'm not that old, but I feel like older people in the queer community, I've spoken to lots of people who are like, I can't believe you young people use this word. This word was the worst thing you could be called. And I'm 35, so I feel like I'm a little bit in between, the youngest members of the queer community and the oldest. And I feel like I see the way young people use this word without blinking.
Yeah.
And when I say it, I still I don't know, even though it was never used against me, I was never, you know, like discriminated against with this particular word. Even when I say it, when I hear it like in my own mouth, I feel like a little nervous.
Yeah.
But I use it because I feel like, I don't know, it makes me feel connected to a lot of people within the community. Like, I feel if I identify myself as part of the queer community, I'm connected to a lot more people than if I just identify myself as a lesbian or as a gay woman.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is the writer in me that just spends a lot of time thinking about words or something, but I don't know. I think they're pretty important. So for me, using healthy in a book that doesn't have anything to do with weight loss felt worth it.
Mm-hmm.
But I totally hear what you're saying. And, and I'm sorry if seeing that word brought up stuff.
Oh, no. And I wasn't saying it that it offended me. And I definitely see the point of like some people will type in the word healthy and your book comes up and they grab that instead of another book. So I definitely, and I'm not saying it was offended to me in any way. I knew what you were doing. And I know at the end of the day, we have to play by words that people type and things like that. But it just, I was just curious,
No, I really appreciate you asking. I really do. And I think it's also really important that a lot of people see themselves represented under the word healthy. Mm-hmm. It's a picture of me on the book. I'm not a TV chef. I'm not a restaurant chef. I'm not someone with this huge, other platform aside from cookbooks or something. And I'm also not a super thin person. And I think it's really valuable also because I'm, an out queer woman, as I just discussed. I think it's really valuable to see healthy with some representation besides, the things we normally, I think, assume with that word. And I hope in doing this, I just really do hope it makes some space for other books with the word healthy, with people who live in larger bodies than I do, who live in non-white bodies, because we just don't see that. And I feel like everyone deserves to know that their bodies are worthy of the title healthy.
Thank you to UCAN for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. And friends, I have an exciting announcement for you. As you know, I have been using UCAN for many years. I believe 2013, maybe 14 was the first year I used UCAN, which is crazy to think about. I loved it immediately. I've been carrying it with me in my races. I carried it in my trail marathon with me, carried it in Boston when I ran Boston in 2019. I have been basically making my own gels, a very concentrated solution that I carry around with me in my races. And many of you said, that's all well and good that you carry it in your hands, but, is there a gel option? And at the time there wasn't, but I'm excited to tell you that UCAN now has a gel option. UCAN Edge Energy represents this big leap in how athletes are going to be fueling for sport. It is the first and only on-the-go training fuel powered by superstarch. Edge is going to put you in this ideal performance state by keeping your blood sugar stable so you can work smarter and harder. It's the next generation of sports fuel. I have been using or making my own version of this for years. It is a really great way to take things down. And it's just so cool now that you can get that 15 grams of superstarch energy in an easy packet that you can take with you on your runs if you don't want to be carrying bottles like I had been. You will see that all their elite athletes are now using it, and there's a lot of really great reviews. Now, that said, I've mentioned many times I'm not particularly an orange fan in anything really. So I am excited to be trying out the new flavors. There's nothing against the flavor itself. You will see there are plenty of good reviews, people saying it tastes like orange creamsicle, but I'm just not an orange person. And you know that I like to be honest. So I just wanted to tell you that. But you should go to ucan.co and use code TINA UCAN. That's code TINA UCAN for 20% off your order. It is very popular, going down really well. And I think if you have been thinking about giving UCAN a try, but the fact there isn't a gel has put you off, now is the time to go try it out. And if you're planning on racing a marathon in the fall, you better be trying it out now, because you want to get started to make sure that you know what your plan is going to be when the races are finally available. Go to ucan.co and use code TINAUCAN for 20% off your order.
I hope in doing this, I just really do hope it makes some space for other books with the word healthy, with people who live in larger bodies than I do, who live in non-white bodies, like, because we just don't see that. And I feel like everyone deserves to know that their bodies are worthy of the title healthy.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for explaining that. And I just want to add before as I did bring this up, I absolutely love Julia's book. I've had it a few weeks and I've already made three things from it. And I'm like you, I love to double or triple meals so that I have to cook less.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've cooked the three things I've made. I've loved each and every one of them. And I love that you just say, like, most of the ones all of the ones I've done have said, like, start with a heavy Dutch oven or pot. And it's basically like throw it all in there, or like you might cook one part and then take it out and then put other things back in the pot. So I'm all about that part too. So I just want to clarify that before we get further.
Oh, I mean, I appreciate that. And I truly do appreciate the conversation around this, because it's complicated, right? And I think it's just valuable to talk about this stuff and untangle it.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So that you mentioned we've been talking about, diet culture having a tough time with learning and loving your own body. You weren't always a fan of exercise culture. So tell us about what your thoughts about running were, like when you were in that stage. Like, was running something you considered doing, like purely to, fit that skinny mold you felt you needed to fit? Was it something that never came into your mind? What were your thoughts early with running?
I think this might be true probably for a lot of people who listen to your podcast. I imagine it might be true for you. I don't know, but running is a really complicated topic for me and very emotional. And like many things that are complicated and emotional, they go back to my mother, who I love and I don't have a complicated relationship with. But I think the things, especially we as women inherit from our mothers, it's complicated. So, I mentioned I grew up in a home, in a family that very much, was part of diet culture. And that translated not just to what foods were, in our home growing up. We were a home filled with Snackwell's cookies, diet ice cream, diet this and that. It also translated to movement. And my mother, I guess she no longer runs. I don't know if you no longer run, if you're still considered a runner, but she was a runner. My mom ran for a long time.
I guess how long it would be since you... no, yeah. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think I would still consider her a runner.
Yeah, I think she would probably be happy to hear that. I don't know. I wish she was here to talk about this with me, because it's really interesting. But anyway, she was a runner when I was growing up, and she ran 2 marathons when... I think the first, I'm making this up, but I think the first when I was maybe around 6 or 7, and the second when I was maybe 12 or 13. So pretty like formative ages to see whatever it is your parents are doing. And my mom, I don't know, I idolized my mom for so long. And I also struggled with my body image and with my weight. And I think that I thought, well, if I could just become a runner, then everything will be okay. And I didn't start really running until I was in college. And I had played sports growing up, so running was part of certain drills and stuff, but I basically chose every position on every team that required no running. So I played like goalie in soccer and like catcher in softball. I actually thought playing catcher meant you could sit down. I didn't realize you were squatting the whole time. So I learned that the hard way, but whatever. But I was literally willing to take a flying ball to my face rather than run, I think is what I'm trying to say. So when I was in college, I started trying to run, and it was really hard for me. And
what was the original reason there?
I think that I thought that, well, if I can, nothing to do with eating or food, but if I become a runner.
Oh, so it was trying to get that.
Yeah,
okay.
I can be in a smaller body and I can be this fit person and I can be like my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I joined this like running. I went to college in New York City. I joined this like New York Roadrunners running club thing.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend who was a runner and I asked her if I could go with her. Like I was really trying to learn how to just honestly put one foot in front of the other. And I put so much pressure on this and I made this little calendar for myself that within a year, I'm going to run a marathon. Meanwhile, I had never run like a mile. And this kind of intense pressure that I put on myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, I also feel like it's put on all of us by diet culture and stuff, but I definitely like, you know, took that ticket and was like, me, like I'll sign up for this. And okay, so long story short, I never ran a marathon. But so even when I could run half a mile and then a mile, like I felt like a failure. It goes back to what we were talking about before, like the picture of the food, because I wasn't doing this really big, huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not appreciating, you know, the literal steps I was taking. And I was not giving myself the opportunity to even think about how any of these things felt. I was just feeling so far away from this goal that I've actually learned is not a goal I have. I totally understand why a lot of people run marathons and what draws them to them. And I know that a lot of people enjoy them. But that is actually not a goal I have anymore. And that has alleviated a lot of this pressure. So basically, that was college. And now this is, I don't know, 15 years later or so. And my relationship to running has just evolved a lot. And it's something that's come in and out of my life. And the most recent time it was very much in my life was the most positive. And it's no longer in my life at the moment because I do have a knee injury. And it's actually really made me reevaluate my relationship to running in general. Like, do I enjoy it? Like, do I get pleasure from it? And just in the way that I'm thinking about food now, like, you know, I've loved to cook my whole life. I've loved it. I feel so joyful in the kitchen, but I haven't always loved eating food. I've felt, you know, guilt and shame and all these things. And now I'm trying to just view every time I eat as like, what an opportunity for pleasure. Like, oh my gosh, I get to eat every day. Like, and I get to eat things I love. Like, that's amazing. So I'm trying to approach movement and running like that. But before the knee injury, what really helped me get into a really positive space with running was taking numbers away from it. So I stopped looking at my pace. I stopped tracking things. I would sometimes keep track of my, like how many miles I was running because I basically just kept going on my road where I live. So I know how much it is. But I tried to really just not care about how fast or how slow I was going. And, you know, I'm not a competitive runner. Like, I know it's very different for people who are racing and all this stuff, but that's not me. You know, I did it because it made me feel strong and it made me feel capable and it made me feel like I was doing something that I wanted to do for a really long time. And I had gotten to a point where I thought I couldn't. And then to do it and to get, you know, to run more than I ever had. You know, I got up to running 5 miles without stopping, which I'm sure for some people listening is like, okay. But for me, it was a big deal.
And
like
a lot
big,
of other
big
people
deal.
listening.
Yeah. And that just felt powerful to me because I did something I didn't think I could do. And it's not something I've felt the need to repeat over and over because it didn't make my body feel good. Like, I kept hurting my knee as much as I wanted to do it. But I basically had a doctor tell me, like, I can get surgery and keep running, or I can stop running and see how I feel. And I honestly think, to be just totally, totally honest, I think if this message hadn't come to me during a pandemic, I probably would have gone and got the surgery, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I just decided for right now, like, I'm just going to stop and see. And now I have no pain. And I walk and I walk and I walk because I love to be outside. And that's something I learned from running. Like, I'm not a treadmill runner. And a lot of it for me has to do with the fact that my wife and I live in a really beautiful area. We live in upstate New York, and it's a place I just really love to be outside. And running allowed me to take in my road that I'm on every day in a different way. You know, like, you experience, you know, whatever road or path you're on differently if you're on your feet rather than if you're in a car or a bicycle. And I liked that. And I liked it for the same reason I love to cook. Like, I'm not looking at my computer screen. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm just outside and I'm present. And that to me feels really valuable. So I'm now at a point where I'm looking for that in other places that honestly just don't hurt my knee, but it's hard. I miss running. I really miss how I felt after a run and that sense of like accomplishment. But I'm learning I can find that in a lot of other places.
Yeah, well, thank you for your honesty there. And I think even that part of it will maybe resonate with some people in two ways. One being the injury side of things that can be so devastating and crushing. And like you said, I think this pandemic has forced people to really come face to face with the things they are willing to do to keep doing something that maybe they're not even doing for the right reasons. I mean, you mentioned about the surgery there. I think a lot of people are in the same boat, or, people who would just be like, oh, give me a cortisone shot and I'll be good to go for 6 weeks until I need another one, rather than saying, okay, like, why am I in so much pain that I need a cortisone shot? Like, so I think that has allowed people to reckon with that. And then also the I don't want to say quitting part of it, but the stepping back part of it. I've had quite a few conversations lately with people who have been working through some version of letting go of something in their life. And it's not that you don't love it or appreciate it or say it's done forever, but sometimes we just need to, as you said, find some other areas, find some other ways to connect with ourselves and with our bodies. And I really admire you saying that, because I would imagine there's some people listening who are feeling that either in their running or in some other area of their life. And it's not easy.
Well, thank you. And just to continue being honest, I was honestly like, I don't know. I felt like I wasn't sure if I was allowed on your podcast, right? Like, I was like, am I just a fraud because I'm not running? Like, but I think, I don't know, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, especially with, the people who listen to your show. And yeah, so thank you.
Oh, no. Do you know by any chance, the comedian Chris Gethard? So I had him on my show a few weeks ago, and he is not a runner. He has a medical, I don't know what the term is. I don't know. He it's basically impossible for him to run.
Okay.
And yet him and I talked for an hour and a half and found plenty to talk about. We've never spoken before, never knew who each other were. So you definitely belong here. And I'm actually really enjoying these conversations that are, can bring running into it, or some area about it, but how it relates to other areas of life. So
yeah,
no, I appreciate that. And I guess to just, wrap up this part of talking about body image relationship to running. You said that you were able to find that peace by letting go of paces. And you said that right now you do miss that feeling of after a run. But were you able towards the end to get to the point where during the process of it, just like cooking while you're doing the cooking, were you able to get to that point, or was it still kind of just at the end of that satisfaction?
It was when I would go by myself, it was towards the end of that satisfaction. But when I would run with a friend, I love that is, I think, what I miss. Just in the way that, what I miss the most during this pandemic is not honestly like cooking for other people, though I miss that, but I miss people like home cooking from other people. I miss going to someone's house and they've made a meal for me. Like, I miss sharing this thing with other people. And I had a friend I was running with and for a while, and it was just so great. And we would go with her dog and we would talk the whole time. And we had this like deeply connected, ongoing conversation because we were moving our bodies while we were talking. And that kept us at like this pace that felt really sustainable. And that is something that I miss, that, I can take a walk with a friend, sure, but it's different. And so I felt that kind of joy and ease when I was with someone else. I didn't find that very easily on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty typical for people. And I love that you got to the point where you could have a conversation with her while running, because that says a lot. New runners typically find they are mind blown by the idea of people talking. So I love that you got to the point where you could enjoy that. Okay, so wrapping up the episode here, just a few more things I want to mention. I love that you had so much more than the recipes in here. There was the things that I think it was, you did multiple like lists, which I'm a list girl, so I love that. Things that you use in your kitchen. There was ways to use like leftover egg yolks or buttermilk, like really helpful, handy things. Conversation prompts, which I thought was awesome, and solo meals to have. I really have enjoyed getting to know this. And the final thing I'd love to, listeners, you can find Simply Julia at their local bookstore.
Yeah, wherever books are sold. Okay. Definitely, I love anyone who supports their local bookstore. And if you go to my website, which is just my name, juliaterschen.com, you can go to the link to my local bookstore and I can sign and personalize your copy if you'd like. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, definitely. We'll put a link in there. The final thing I wanted to ask you about, it said in the little blurb about you that you're the founder of Equity at the Table, which is an inclusive digital directory of women and non-binary individuals in food. So why was that needed, or what was the impetus behind that?
Sure. Thanks for asking about it. So Equity at the Table is exactly what you said. It's a digital directory. It's free to use, it's free to join, and it's very easy to navigate. And I started it with the support of an advisory board and a web designer. We started it, I should say, because there is just a lot of racism and misogyny in the food industry, as there is in every industry, but this is the industry we're in. And basically, I just kept hearing from people, magazine editors, book publishers, because this is the world I, occupy a tiny bit of space in. These are the people I talk to. I kept hearing from those types of people who organize conferences and stuff like, well, I know, diversity and inclusion and equity, these words that get thrown around the way healthy does, right? Yeah. But I would hear from people that they knew that was important, but they just, quote unquote, couldn't find anyone, which I just thought was like a pretty lousy and kind of lazy response. And I just felt like there's so many of us, there's so many of us in the queer community, and there's so many people of color, and, and just like, why aren't you looking harder? And then, I write recipes for a living, so I love creating tools. So I just kept thinking like, well, what if there was a website that was just like this really easy to navigate directory where you could find people who do all different things within the food industry, because the food industry is so many industries under one umbrella. And you could search by those professions, but you could also search by identification and location and any mixture of these things. And, as you just mentioned, I love lists. I make lists all the time. They're in my books. They're, my whole life is just like one long grocery list. And so I thought like, oh, this is a list. Like, this can't be so hard. Like, I had no idea how complicated building like a searchable directory would be. But that's why I worked with people who are much smarter than me to do that. And yeah, it's now a little over 3 years old. We have members, I believe, in every state and different parts of the world. And people continue to join and people continue to use it. And, I feel like 3 years in internet years is a long time. And I think it speaks to just how valuable it is to have resources. I don't think Equity at the Table is the answer to the, chronic and blatant just racism and, misogyny and homophobia that are in the food industry, but I think it's a resource to help. So,
yes, thank you. All right, I will put a link in the show notes to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Julia, anything else you would like to tell the listeners about relationships to food, about cooking, just about anything that comes to mind for you that you would like to remind people?
I think just what I would like to remind people is it just doesn't have to be complicated to be good.
That's true. I will definitely agree with that. And I love that. And one final thing I'll mention is I really enjoyed that your recipes are all like literally as if you were just on the phone to someone and like, hey, so throw those in there. And then while you're doing that, go get this. I really enjoyed the kind of step-by-step instruction in a different way to what you see in most books. So
thank you.
Thank you so much. I will put links to your social media in the show notes. Anywhere else you want to point people to?
No, that's great. And I guess, to my local bookstore. I can send you that link. So
I will definitely include that.
Cool.
For sure. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was really great. Thank you.
Before we end this episode, I just want to take a moment to shout out my podcast editor, Jeremy Nessel, who has done such a wonderful job of looking after my podcast, taking out all the mishaps in the episodes, while still keeping in the vulnerability and the realness and the rawness of the conversation. This is not one of those podcasts where I take out the ums and the ers and the sometimes the delay in words, because I think it's very important to keep that authenticity. We're surrounded by perfected and manicured everything, and I think it's really important that Running for Real stays that way. So thank you to Jeremy for your work. I also want to thank Maria Vargas and Amber Moore, who are also part of my team. They've been a big part of this community and me being able to build this brand. So just want to give them a shout out too. All right, let's get right back to the end of this episode. That definitely went into a bit of a direction that I did not expect, but I want to thank Julia for her honesty, her vulnerability, for sharing the struggles that she's been going through with us. And I hope you found that episode helpful and insightful, and it made you think about your own life, especially when it comes to body image. We talk about this a lot, and our relationship to this sport, our relationship to why we want to exercise. And just finding that comfort in who we are. I hope that episode with Julia helped. And I really do recommend checking out her book. We've been trying a lot of the recipes. I don't think I mentioned in the episodes which one I have tried, but if you do happen to go get her book, Simply Julia, we have tried the carrot and chickpea korma, the stewy escarole, and the Caribbean palau as of this recording, and really enjoyed all of them. Really easy. I love the fact that most of hers are like throw it in one pot kind of thing. Definitely about less washing up. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. You can get 20% off your order at Generation UCAN by going to ucan.co/Tina Muir. It will put your code especially in there. You can go check out their new gel, which I was talking about in the episode. Thank you to Momentous. I was talking about the brain drive that I used in my trail race. And that has been really helpful for me, not only in my work, but also in my running. You can get 20% off your order there at livemomentous.com using code TINA. And finally, thank you to Tracksmith for just having the most comfortable and stylish clothes and being supportive of the running community. You can get $15 off your order of $75 or more by going to tracksmith.com and using code TINA15. Some of my favorites right now are the Session shorts and the Horizon tank. Go check it out. I want to take a moment to thank you so much for listening. If you are enjoying these episodes, please consider leaving a review. I really appreciate your reviews. They mean so much to me, and your support means a lot. Thank you so much. I will see you on Monday for another guided run, and thanks for tuning in.